to Deep Dive Talk.
Great to be here.
Today we're diving into something really fundamental. It's about what you believe about your own abilities, your qualities, how that can completely reshape your life.
Yeah, and what you're actually capable of achieving. It's huge.
We're going to explore this idea of mindset, specifically the difference between what people call a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
That's right. And you probably see this all the time, right? Think about someone you know who maybe seems, well, almost desperate to prove they're right.
Or gets really sensitive about, small criticisms, takes it very personally.
Exactly. Or maybe you felt it yourself sometimes. That feeling that certain things about you, I don't know, your intelligence, maybe your personality, are just set in stone. Can't really change them.
Right. So this deep dive is all about trying to understand where those feelings come from and, maybe more importantly, what other possibilities exist.
Yeah, what's the alternative?
Our goal today is to really get to grips with these two mindsets. See how they affect how you react, especially to challenges, setbacks.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately what it all means for your potential, your capacity to learn and actually grow.
So where did this whole idea even start? Was there a specific moment?
Well, the initial spark, interestingly, came from watching kids, specifically how different children reacted when they were given really difficult puzzles.
Okay. What happened?
You give them a problem that really stretched them, right? And some kids, they just light up, almost excited. You'd hear things like, "Ooh, I love a challenge."
Huh. That's one reaction. What about the others?
Well, what was fascinating was that other children, even if they were finding it really tough, they saw the whole thing differently, more like an opportunity to learn something.
So even if they were struggling, they weren't necessarily upset by it.
Not in the same way. They might say something like, "I was hoping this would be informative." It really suggested this fundamental difference in how they were perceiving the difficulty itself.
Okay, so that difference led to these mindset concepts.
Exactly. And from observations like that, the idea of the fixed mindset started to take shape.
Which is?
It's basically the underlying belief that your core qualities, things like how smart you are, your personality, your character, they're essentially static, fixed.
You get a certain amount, and that's it.
Pretty much. That's the belief. So if you think that way, mistakes or failures feel incredibly threatening.
Why? Because they prove you don't have enough.
Kind of. They seem like evidence of some inherent lack, some deficiency you can't change, which can lead to feeling, paralyzed or just wanting to hide your shortcomings.
It sounds like you're constantly being judged or feeling like you are.
That's a great way to put it. Like you're always on trial. Imagine a teacher who really believed IQ scores told the whole story.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Picture students seated in IQ order, only the smartest kids getting any real responsibility.
Wow, that sends a pretty clear message, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Think about the environment that creates. It really hammers home this idea that ability is just a rigid hierarchy, a fixed ladder.
And there's not much point trying to climb if you're not already at the top.
Exactly. It completely overlooks the potential for development, for growth.
Okay, so let's flip the coin then. What about the growth mindset? This sounds like the more hopeful alternative.
It really is. The growth mindset is fundamentally the belief that your abilities, your qualities, they aren't carved in stone at all. They can actually be developed, cultivated.
How?
Through things like dedication, effort, learning from experience, basically hard work.
So your potential isn't fixed.
That's the crucial part. People with a growth mindset tend to see their potential as, well, unknown. It can expand in ways they can't even predict yet.
So the focus shifts.
Right. It shifts away from constantly needing to prove how good you already are and towards the actual process, the journey of getting better, of improvement itself.
That feels like it takes a lot of pressure off, doesn't it?
It really can. This idea that major achievements aren't just about some innate talent you either have or you don't.
But they come from years of passion, hard work.
Exactly. And history is actually full of examples that really bring this home. Think about someone like Charles Darwin or Leo Tolstoy.
Weren't they considered pretty average kids?
By many accounts, yes.
Oh.
Ordinary children. Or think about sports one. Ben Hogan, golf legend, apparently quite uncoordinated as a child.
No way.
Yeah. Or Cindy Sherman, the famous photographer. She failed her first photography course.
That's amazing.
And Geraldine Page, the actress, advised early on to just quit acting, told she lacked talent.
Wow. So these stories really underline how believing you can grow makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. It can lead to truly remarkable outcomes, even against initial odds.
Okay, so let's bring it back to challenges. When things don't go to plan, how does someone with a fixed mindset react versus someone with a growth mindset?
Right. So if you're operating from a fixed mindset and you hit a setback, the tendency is often towards intense feelings of failure, maybe even a kind of paralysis.
Even for small things.
Interestingly, yes. It could be something relatively minor, like getting a C+ on a paper you worked hard on, or maybe just getting a parking ticket on an already bad day.
What happens internally?
For someone locked in that fixed view, the internal reaction can be really extreme. Almost like that C+ or that ticket is a judgment on their fundamental worth or competence, utter defeat.
Okay. And the growth mindset person facing the same C plus or parking ticket.
Their reaction would likely be quite different.
How so?
Well, approaching it with a growth mindset, your focus tends to shift immediately. You think, okay, what can I learn here? Or how can I improve next time?
So it's seen more as information.
Exactly. A data point, not a final verdict on who you are.
Yeah.
And this fundamental difference in belief, in interpretation, it leads to vastly different thoughts and then different actions.
So it's broader than just intelligence, right? These mindsets affect how you see other parts of yourself too.
Oh, absolutely. You might have an intelligence mindset, sure, that affects how you view your mental chops.
But also,
You also likely have a personality mindset. This shapes how you see your personal qualities. Things like, are you dependable? Are you caring? Even social skills.
and the core difference holds.
Yeah, the fixed mindset makes you worry about being judged on those traits. Are you enough of that thing? While the growth mindset focuses on, okay, how can I develop these qualities? How can I strengthen them?
Let's think about relationships. How might this play out between partners?
That's a really important area where this shows up. Say you approach your marriage with a growth mindset. When challenges come up, what's your instinct?
Probably to talk about it. Try to figure it out together, find solutions.
Right, communicate, work together.
Yeah.
But now imagine your partner has more of a fixed mindset in that situation.
How might they react to, say, me suggesting we try something different?
They might feel deeply wounded, like really personally attacked. They might interpret your suggestion for change not as, let's make us better, but as, you think I'm fundamentally flawed.
Ouch. That sounds like it could lead to defensiveness rather than problem solving.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
It can create this cycle of feeling damaged, needing repair, instead of just tackling the issue head on.
Okay. What about at work? In leaders, maybe?
You see it clearly in the professional world, too. Leaders with more of a growth mindset. They often prioritize long-term improvement. They're usually more willing to take calculated risks.
Why? Because failure isn't the end.
Partly. They understand that setbacks, even failures, can provide invaluable learning, not just for them, but for the whole team, the whole organization.
Whereas a leader with a more fixed mindset,
Might be much more focused on, say, short-term wins, looking good now.
appearing like the hero.
Exactly. Even if the strategy isn't really sustainable long-term. It's interesting, you sometimes hear these super successful CEOs, looking
Yeah.
back, they often attribute their company's performance not to their own innate genius, but to their constant learning. Their drive to, like, become qualified for the job at each new stage.
It's that continuous improvement thing again, isn't it? It sounds like this growth mindset can really help push past what seem like limits.
It truly can. Think about Christopher Reeve. After his accident, paralyzed,
Yeah, amazing story.
he went on to defy so many medical expectations through this incredibly demanding exercise program. It's a powerful illustration of that potential for growth, even beyond what seems like insurmountable physical barriers.
But that pressure, that need to prove yourself in the fixed mindset, that can lead to negative stuff too, right? Even dishonesty.
Yes, unfortunately, that constant feeling of needing to validate your inherent ability, it can create intense pressure. Imagine talented young people.
Feeling they have to be brilliant all the time.
Exactly. And sadly, that pressure might lead them to, well, exaggerate achievements, maybe even fabricate successes just to maintain that image of perfection.
And it's not just individuals. Believing abilities are fixed can hold back groups, like in schools.
Definitely. Think about how students sometimes get tracked or grouped based on perceived ability.
The smart group and the not so smart group.
Right. And ironically, the kids labeled high ability. Sometimes they become complacent. They think, I'm smart. I don't need to try as hard.
Well, the others.
The kids in the low ability group might internalize that label, feel like, well, this is all I'm capable of.
But what happens if the teacher fosters a growth mindset?
Oh, well, research consistently shows that when educators actively cultivate that growth mindset, focusing on effort, development for everyone, those initial labels, become much less important. All students tend to achieve more.
It really seems to circle back to that fear of judgment in the fixed mindset, that constant need to prove yourself.
Precisely. It comes from that core belief. Your worth is tied to your innate abilities. And every single test, every evaluation, it's a measure of that fixed capacity.
So there's no room for error, no room for the learning process.
Very little. Everything feels incredibly high stakes immediately. Mistakes aren't learning opportunities, they're verdicts.
It's interesting, even places like NASA looking for astronauts, they recognize that judging someone just on one assessment is limited,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. What's fascinating is that even in these super high stakes environments, there's often a deep understanding that, one test, one snapshot in time, it only tells you so much.
It doesn't predict everything about their future potential or how they might grow.
Exactly. Limited predictive value for future success.
The fixed mindset can also pop up in other ways, maybe like a sense of entitlement.
Yes, it can. Sometimes people who had early success, maybe they were always told they were naturals.
Yeah.
They might develop this sense of entitlement or even superiority. Then, when they hit a real challenge, something that requires genuine effort, struggle, adaptation, they might resist.
Because hard work feels beneath them.
Kind of. They might see themselves as inherently better rather than someone who needs to put in the work like everyone else.
And failure itself. We touched on this, but it's perceived so differently.
Hugely different. In a fixed mindset, failure isn't just an event. It can become part of your identity.
Like, I am a failure.
Exactly. It can lead to this crushing feeling of being a has-been or just fundamentally flawed. Even relatively minor setbacks can trigger that sense of complete failure.
So how does someone with that mindset typically cope when they fail? What do they do?
Well, a couple of common reactions. One is deflection, blaming others, making excuses, anything to avoid personal responsibility.
Okay, what else?
Another coping mechanism is trying to restore their self-esteem by looking down on others, finding people they perceive as worse off to make themselves feel better.
That sounds pretty fragile. Is there a link between this mindset and, say, mental health, like depression?
Research does suggest a connection, yes, a link between a fixed mindset and higher levels of depression.
Why would that be?
It often seems to stem from that tendency to ruminate, to just go over and over problems and setbacks, interpreting them as proof you're incompetent or unworthy.
And that makes them feel worse.
Right. And the more depressed they feel, often the more they withdraw, disengage, which just reinforces the cycle.
Wow. Okay, so the growth mindset offers a much healthier way through challenges, it seems.
It really does. It's much more resilient. If you have a growth mindset, you fundamentally understand that effort is crucial. It's essential.
Even for people who seem naturally talented.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, people with a growth mindset often admire effort in others. They see it for what it is, the thing that ignites ability and turns potential into real accomplishment.
Like the Seabiscuit story, the racehorse.
Exactly. Perfect example. Overcoming bleak circumstances, low expectations, all through determination, spirit, and a team that believed in potential, not just pedigree. Effort made the difference.
Okay, this is the big question then. Are you just stuck with the mindset you have? Or can you actually change it?
That's the really encouraging part. Mindsets are not fixed. You absolutely can change them.
Where do you start?
Often, the very first step is just awareness. Simply learning about these two mindsets and starting to notice which one tends to drive your reactions.
So recognizing when you're in that fixed mindset mode.
Exactly. Learning to identify those moments and then consciously choosing to shift, to lean into the growth mindset
How do you do that consciously?
by deliberately embracing challenges as chances to learn, by reframing failures not as verdicts, but as stepping stones, and by truly internalizing that effort is the path to getting better.
It sounds like the fixed mindset might feel safer, maybe? More certain in the short term?
It can seem that way. There's a sort of false security in thinking, I know where I stand,
Yeah.
but ultimately, as we've discussed, it really limits your potential.
And leads to negative reactions.
Right. Whereas cultivating a growth mindset, it allows you to actually enjoy learning, to find fulfillment in the effort itself, not just the end result.
And the shift can have real measurable effects.
Oh, definitely. Studies with students, for example, consistently show that those who develop a growth mindset often see their grades improve over time, especially when things get tougher, like transitioning to college.
How come?
Because when they perform poorly on something, they don't attribute it to, I'm just not smart enough. They think, okay, I didn't understand that material well enough, or My study strategy wasn't effective.
And then they change their approach.
Exactly. They focus on how to improve. They look for better strategies. It's proactive.
That fear of failure really seems like the big stumbling block for the fixed mindset.
It's huge. That fear of not measuring up, of looking dumb, can be so powerful that it stops people from even trying challenging things.
Yeah.
Things where they might actually learn the most.
Because they might fail and confirm their fixed limits.
Precisely. And interestingly, even things that seem positive, like constantly telling a kid, "You're so smart,"
That can backfire.
it can inadvertently push them into a fixed mindset. They become afraid to tackle anything difficult where they might not look smart because their identity is tied to being inherently intelligent.
So how you praise someone matters a lot then.
Immensely. Praising their effort, the strategies they used, their persistence when it got tough, that's what fosters a growth mindset.
Because it focuses on the process, not just the inherent trait.
Exactly. It teaches them how success happens through effort, through learning, through trying different approaches.
That makes so much sense. The burden of just being talented must feel immense with a fixed mindset.
It can be incredibly draining. That constant pressure to live up to the label, the anxiety,
Yeah.
it's tough. Whereas focusing on the process cultivates that love of learning and resilience when you inevitably hit bumps.
What about external things, like stereotypes? Can they push people towards a fixed mindset?
Yes, definitely. Stereotypes can be really damaging here. If you're constantly bombarded with messages that say your group isn't typically good at math or science or leadership,
You might start to believe it applies to you personally.
exactly, it can reinforce a fixed mindset about your own abilities in that specific area. Creates that feeling of, I don't belong here, or I'm probably not cut out for this, which obviously hinders potential.
And when someone with a really strong fixed mindset faces a big failure, what happens then? How do they cope long term?
They can really, really struggle. Instead of seeing it as, okay, what went wrong? What can I learn? They might just get stuck.
Stuck how?
Stuck in defensiveness, maybe,
Yeah.
or completely blaming external factors, the unfair test, the biased boss, whatever. They can't see their own role or figure out how to approach things differently next time.
It really sounds like mindset is tied closely to character, to resilience.
I think that's absolutely right. If you have that growth mindset, you're just much more likely to persevere when things get tough, to learn from setbacks.
Because challenges aren't seen as threats to your core identity.
Exactly. There are opportunities to get stronger, to learn, to develop new skills, new approaches.
We see this in sports all the time, right?
Oh, constantly. Athletes with a growth mindset fundamentally believe their skills aren't fixed. They know they can get better through deliberate practice, hard work, coaching.
And they show that grit, that determination.
Yes. They're more likely to demonstrate that character. They see losses or poor performances not as the end, but as fuel, as information for how to improve.
Even the greats, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about raw talent.
Absolutely not. Think about Michael Jordan being cut from his high school team, or Tiger Woods constantly refining his swing even after winning majors.
They never stopped working, learning, improving.
Exactly. Their dedication to practice, to learning from mistakes, to pushing their own boundaries, that is the growth mindset in action. They embrace challenges.
That fixed mindset focus on individual talent, could that cause problems in teams or in business?
It certainly can. If the whole focus is on finding the genius, the individual star, sometimes teamwork gets neglected. Shared goals might suffer.
Like in a company led by someone who thinks they are the key. Yeah. A leader with a fixed mindset who sees themselves as the indispensable genius might not invest enough in building a strong, collaborative team. They might struggle with developing others or even planning for succession.
Because they believe talent is innate, not developed.
Pretty much. Whereas a leader with a growth mindset, they're going to foster a very different culture.
How so?
They tend to create a culture of development, of learning.
Yeah.
They genuinely value the growth of their employees. They understand that the whole organization gets stronger when everyone is learning and improving.
And that kind of culture is probably better equipped to handle change.
Much better equipped, more adaptable, more resilient in a world that's constantly shifting.
Does something like groupthink connect here, where everyone just agrees with the leader?
That's a really interesting connection. Yeah, I think it can. If you have an over-reliance on the perceived genius of a leader who has a fixed mindset.
People might be afraid to challenge them or offer different ideas.
Exactly. It can stifle critical thinking, discourage dissent, and, yeah, lead straight into groupthink. Not healthy.
So if you're leading a team, How do you actively cultivate a growth mindset culture?
It's about making a conscious shift, moving away from a culture that's primarily about judgment and valuation.
Towards one that values learning and development.
Precisely. Creating an environment where mistakes aren't punished, but seen as learning opportunities, where feedback, real constructive feedback, is actively sought and valued, where the focus is on everyone getting better together.
This isn't just work stuff, though. Let's go back to personal relationships. How else does mindset impact them?
Well, think about expectations. A fixed mindset can sometimes lead to this unrealistic expectation of, like, instant perfection in a relationship.
The soulmate idea, where everything should be easy.
Kind of. The belief that if you have to work at the relationship, if there's effort involved, then maybe it just wasn't meant to be.
And that prevents you from developing relationship skills.
It really can. It hinders you from learning how to navigate differences, how to communicate effectively through conflict, how to compromise all the skills that actually make relationships strong and lasting.
Whereas the growth mindset approach,
Recognizes that partners are different, that challenges will arise, and crucially, that the skills needed to deal with these things can be learned and developed together.
leading to deeper connection, maybe.
Absolutely. Deeper connection and growth for both people. It requires communication, empathy, and that willingness to work through the tough stuff.
Does mindset affect forgiveness too?
I think it can, yeah. With a fixed mindset, forgiving might feel difficult because it could imply acknowledging flaws either in the other person, which feels like a permanent judgment, or in yourself, perhaps your judgment in choosing them.
Whereas a growth mindset allows you to.
Focus more on learning from the situation,
Hmm.
understanding what happened, what roles people played, and how to move forward constructively, rather than getting stuck assigning permanent blame or holding on to resentment.
What about comparing yourself to others? Does mindset influence that?
Oh, big time. If you have a fixed mindset, you might find yourself constantly measuring yourself against others.
Feeling like you need to be better or feeling jealous?
Both. There can be this need to constantly outdo others or even diminish their accomplishments to feel good about yourself. A growth mindset, though, fosters a focus on your own path, your personal growth.
So you can actually celebrate other successes.
Yeah, genuinely. Because their success doesn't take anything away from your own potential to learn and develop. It's not a zero-sum game.
Does this extend to just general social situations? Feeling anxious?
It can. That fixed mindset fear of judgment can definitely create social anxiety. If you're constantly worried about saying the wrong thing or not seeming smart enough or cool enough,
You can't really be yourself.
exactly, it prevents you from being authentic and open because you're too busy managing potential negative impressions.
Okay, let's talk about something difficult. Bullying. How does mindset fit in there?
Bullying, unfortunately, seems deeply rooted in a fixed mindset.
How so?
It involves making harsh judgments about another person's worth, seeing them as inherently less than. And the bully often acts out to establish dominance, maybe seeking a self-esteem boost by demeaning someone else.
And what about the person being bullied? Does their mindset matter?
It does. If the victim also have a fixed mindset, they might internalize those horrible judgments, believe they are worthless or deserve it. They might also get stuck in thoughts of revenge.
And a growth mindset response.
It involves rejecting the bully's right to judge your fundamental worth, focusing on your own resilience, seeking support, and finding constructive ways to respond. Rather than internalizing the negativity or mirroring the aggression, it's about building yourself up, not letting them define you.
This all has massive implications for kids, doesn't it? Especially around praise and dealing with mistakes.
Huge implications. We touched on praise earlier. Even well-meaning praise like, "you're so smart," can accidentally foster that fixed mindset.
Because it ties their worth to innate intelligence.
Right. Which then makes them afraid to try hard things where they might not look smart and risk losing that label.
So what's the better way to praise a child?
Focus on the process. Praise their effort. Wow, you worked really hard on that. Praise the strategies they used. That was a clever way you figured that out. Praise their persistence. I saw you didn't give up even when it got tricky.
Because that teaches them that progress comes from those actions.
Exactly. It comes from effort, learning, trying things,
Yeah.
not just from being gifted.
And when a child does fail or struggle, what kind of messages help then?
Avoid falling back on just reassuring their ability. Don't worry, you're smart, you'll get it. That can actually be unhelpful.
So what should you do instead?
Focus on the process again. Talk about the effort. That was a tough problem, wasn't it? What did you try? Talk about learning. What do you think you learned from trying it that way? Talk about future strategies. What could you try differently next time?
So asking questions that make them think and problem solve.
Yes. Encourage reflection. Help them see it as a learning opportunity, not a final judgment on their capability.
Does even just asking about schoolwork get interpreted differently?
It can, yeah. A child with a fixed mindset might hear a parent asking about grades and feel judged. Are they checking if I'm smart enough?
While the growth mindset kid,
Is more likely to see that same parental interest as support for their learning. Encouragement to develop good habits, to understand the material, less about judgment, more about progress.
what about pressure? Like pressuring kids to get into a specific good college.
Oh, that can be really damaging if it comes from a fixed view of their potential. You have this ability, so you must achieve this outcome.
Why is it damaging?
It can completely crush their own interests, their intrinsic motivation. Their actual love of learning gets replaced by anxiety about meeting external expectations based on a fixed label.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, what about effective teachers? Do they tend to foster growth mindsets?
The best ones absolutely do. They often create this amazing environment that's both nurturing and demanding.
How do they balance that?
They emphasize growth and effort over just innate talent. They give honest, sometimes tough feedback, but always with a clear plan or path for improvement. They convey a fundamental belief that all their students can learn and develop.
And this applies to coaches, too.
Definitely. Growth-minded coaches focus on the development process for every single player. Effort, learning, continuous improvement. That's the priority, regardless of where someone started.
It's not just about winning this Saturday.
Exactly. It's about getting better, day by day, week by week. The winning often follows from that focus on process.
It's interesting, even success itself can be a challenge if it leads to complacency, right? Especially with a fixed mindset.
That's a really insightful point. Yes, if you have a fixed mindset, success can almost be dangerous. You might think, okay, I've arrived, I'm good, and then you stop pushing.
Or you get terrified of losing that successful status.
Right. Whereas growth-minded individuals and teams, they see setbacks, even after success, as information, opportunities to learn, adapt, maybe develop a more complete approach. They don't rest on their laurels.
So that idea of praising the process seems really central to all of this.
It's absolutely crucial. Praising effort, strategies, seeking help, persistence. It directly teaches that progress comes from these actions, not just from being born with something.
But the praise needs to be real, right? Not just empty words.
Oh, totally. It has to be genuine.
Yeah.
Tied to actual effort the child or person put in, specific strategies they used. Kids especially see right through fake praise. It has to be authentic.
So developing a growth mindset, it's not like a one-time fix.
Not at all. It's really a journey, an ongoing process.
What does that journey involve?
It involves becoming more aware of your own fixed mindset, triggers those situations or thoughts that tend to pull you back into thinking your abilities are static,
And then,
and then consciously choosing growth-oriented responses in those moments. It takes practice. It takes intention.
is it okay to still feel bad after a setback, even if you're trying to have a growth mindset?
Absolutely. It's completely normal to feel disappointed, frustrated, maybe even sad when things don't go well. Having a growth mindset doesn't mean you're emotionless.
So what's the key difference then?
The key is not letting those negative feelings derail you, not letting them convince you that the setback defines you or proves you're incapable. It's about feeling the feelings, acknowledging them, and then refocusing on constructive action. Okay, that stung. Now what can I learn? How can I move forward?
You mentioned using stories earlier. How can narratives help foster a growth mindset?
Stories are powerful. When we tell stories about ourselves, about others, to our kids, we can consciously choose to highlight the process.
Instead of just the final success.
Exactly. Celebrate the effort involved, the strategies tried, the resilience shown through difficulties, the lessons learned from mistakes, not just the shiny trophy at the end. That narrative shapes how we understand achievement.
So for listeners wanting to actively cultivate this, what are some concrete steps?
Well, first, set goals specifically for growth. Not just outcome goals, but learning goals. I want to understand this concept better, or I want to improve my communication skills in meetings.
Okay, set growth goals. Then what?
Make concrete plans. How will you achieve that growth? What steps will you take? Who can help you? Write it down. Be specific.
And keep at it.
Yes. Actively maintain progress. Develop helpful habits. And importantly, anticipate setbacks and think about how you'll learn from them when they happen. Because they will happen.
I remember remember you mentioning a technique, personifying the fixed mindset.
Ah, yes, that can be surprisingly helpful for some people. Giving your fixed mindset voice a name, maybe picturing it as a character.
How'd you do that?
It helps create a little distance. It
Yeah.
allows you to see those limiting thoughts, you're not good enough, don't even try, as coming from that character, not as objective truth.
So you can evaluate them more objectively.
Exactly. You can say, there's Fred again telling me I can't do this. It makes it easier to challenge those thoughts, respond with more self-compassion, and consciously choose a growth-oriented path instead.
It really sounds like this is a continuous effort then, not just for yourself, but maybe also in how you support others.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing journey, continually setting growth goals for yourself and also thinking about how you can help create environments at home, at work, in your community where others feel safe to learn, risk, and grow too.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a moment for reflection for everyone listening, think about your own life. Are there any areas where you suspect a fixed mindset might be, well, subtly holding you back?
Yeah, where might you be avoiding challenges or feeling overly sensitive to judgment?
And what's maybe one small intentional step you could take, maybe even today, to start cultivating a more growth-oriented perspective in that specific area, whether it's how you approach learning or challenges or even your relationships?
Just remember that core belief, the belief that your qualities, your abilities can be developed, it's incredibly powerful. It's like a key unlocking potential you might not even realize you have. So embrace that journey, the journey of learning and growth.
We really hope you'll take some time to think about the examples and ideas we shared. Consider how they might connect with situations you've faced. Maybe there was an aha moment that sparked for you during our conversation.
And maybe here's one final thought to chew on. Think about one area, just one, where you typically feel that strong urge to prove yourself, where you really want people to see you as competent or talented.
Okay.
Now, what did it actually look like, feel like, if you approached that same area, but with the primary focus shifted? Shifted away from proving and towards learning and improvement instead. Just explore that shift mentally. See what new possibilities might open up.